So, the theme for today, why play matters, a superpower for children post-pandemic. I'd just like to briefly introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Carolina Same. I am the CEO of Create Cat, which is the company that the three of us at the top of your screens work with and for. I'm based between Singapore and the UK. Originally, I'm an occupational therapist and an arts and play therapist, and I did my master's in education, looking at learning for 4 to 5 year olds and the role of teacher, always looking at play and always looking at creativity and trying to understand why this is so important. And this is what we really hope to get across for you today. So what I really hope to share today in various ways and discuss with you at the end is how play helps build the social and emotional well-being of our children more than ever at this time in history and our history. We need to support our children post-pandemic. I want to look at how play provides a solid foundation for school readiness. And this is particularly pertinent, I know, for those of you in the Philippines who really inspired this webinar to happen, because you've had one of the longest lockdowns in the world of nearly 2 years. And it's, I think, for a lot of children, this August, September, they will be going back to school, having had 2 years out of school. And so we felt this webinar was very pertinent to help us think about how can we play with our children to help them be ready for that admission to school when 2 years have been quite severely interrupted. We're going to look very briefly on why play is so important for all aspects of early childhood development. And again, being based in Asia for a lot of my professional life, people have said, oh, no, children must learn, they mustn't play. Here at Create Cat, we believe play is learning, and play is the foundation for all learning. And I hope I'll be able to convince you why this is through this webinar. And then what we're going to introduce you to is our developmental play model, which Carrie and I developed from work in rural India about 8 years ago, when we saw the needs of children in a special needs school for foundations in learning so that they could reach their full potential. I haven't got time to tell you how it came about, but if you're interested, on our YouTube channel, there's a little video about the story of how the mothers in rural India showed us what they needed for their children. And that's how our framework that we'll introduce you to a bit later was born. So to start off with, I just want you to think a little bit, what did you play as a child? And maybe you climbed trees, maybe you did pretend play, maybe you played out with your friends and neighbors, maybe you built dens, something I did as a child. What's a memory that you have of play? And when you think about that, what did it make you feel? Because it's the social and emotional, the feelings that play gives us that I think are so pertinent for today's talk. So just thinking a little bit, and maybe these are some of the thoughts that come up. You can pop them in the chat box as well. Happiness, freedom, a sense of being connected, relaxation, a sense of control. We put some of this in the little animation while you were being logged in. I hope you saw the joy of children. Somebody said to me the other day that they felt transported when they played. Very interesting post-pandemic, when a lot of us felt a bit trapped, that play can transport us to a different place or a different feeling of being strong, maybe at peace. Sometimes I know play can be frustrating, and if you don't have the opportunities or somebody tries to control it, but we're focusing on the power of play and the positive power of play. And then if we think about what has the pandemic done to children and how has it made them feel? Carrie and I are both clinicians and have worked with children over the last 2 years. And certainly in my work in Singapore, during that time, we were seeing an increase in anxiety, an increase in developmental challenges, particularly around movement and concentration and focus. So again, I'm sure a lot of you have come because you are all too aware of what the pandemic has done to children, and there are concerns about it. And again, I've got a few ideas that came up when I was thinking about it, that children feel anxious. A lot of children have felt trapped, and I know some children have been literally trapped in their homes for months on end. I think different countries, we've all had different experiences, but this sense of being physically disconnected, thankfully to the wonderful internet, we are able to be connected, but not in the same physical, three-dimensional, emotional way that as human beings we require. I've heard of how children have been bored. They don't feel so in control. There's been sadness, powerlessness, isolation, limited and closed down, maybe lost. But also the positive side is that a lot of children have grown up, and a lot of children have had a chance to be more with families. We know that in some cases this has been positive. Sadly, a lot of the research also suggests that there's been an increase in some countries of up to 20% in abuse in the home. So a lot of you are experts in this field. You'll know all too well that the pandemic has changed how our children have grown up over the last couple of years. And those of you who have children or work with children know that this is something we really need to address, and we really need to address fast. A lot of the research about what the impact of the pandemic has been is unlikely to come out for a couple of years, because we need some of those longitudinal studies. But I'm sure, like Carrie and I, a lot of you will find that you've seen it, an immediate change in children's behavior over the last couple of years. These references they are on the Academy. I've tried to back it up with some of the research that's already coming out that's inspired and informed my work. I'm not going to dwell on these because you can find the reference list on the Academy. But I think it's always good when we're talking about these things that we back it up with people who have done research and have got data about the impact of what we're seeing on children and how consistent it is with things that are happening across the world. Here at Create Cat, we believe that play is the language and occupation of childhood. It is the way that children develop and grow, and it is the way that they can build a future. As a parent and as a clinician who works with children and an educator, children have taught me more and more over the years how play is their language. And I think I've been very privileged to learn that language. But it's interesting when we think about play, how often we forget the early play. And when I explain to you this through the pyramid, you're going to see how it goes way deeper than we often think and remember as adults. You know, we take approaches from play therapy, from neuroscience, from psychology, from occupational therapy, from drama arts and play therapy, and from play-based education and the Lego Foundation. And these are some of the theorists that inform our practice. I want to read you, though, I want to go back to the stories that children have taught me. And I'm going to read you a little story from our book, our developmental playbook, which to me really sums up why play matters and how it transforms children's lives. And it's a little story called Joe Takes on the World. Now, this is pre-pandemic I wrote this story, but I think the essence of it remains pertinent today. Joe is a 4-year-old boy who comes home from preschool, having not had a good day. He felt left out in the playground by his more boisterous classmates. And to add insult to injury, he keeps being told off by the teacher for not sitting still or paying attention. Mum doesn't need to ask how his day has been. It's written all over him. His dejected feelings need no language. He skulks into the house and upstairs into his bedroom, where Mum can hear him going through his toys. 10 minutes later, Joe emerges at the top of the stairs, his soldier's breastplate over his chest and helmet firmly on his head. He brandishes his toy sword, shoulders back, a determined look on his face, and his dignity restored. He's off to play in the playground with his neighborhood friends. and to take on the world again. To me, this little story encapsulates why play and how play is so powerful, and how children will use it as a superpower to transform from one state to another. There's a wonderful little YouTube snippet that we don't have time to play today, but it's by an evolutionary biologist called Peter Gray, and it's called The Decline of Play. And I really recommend, if you get a chance, to look at it, because it's a 20-minute YouTube snippet, which is so inspiring about how children who play are more resilient, they're less anxious, and are able to take on the world. And we have lots more stories in our little book. I'm going to share another one with you a bit later. But children transform their world through the process of play, through doing, through the objects like the sword and the helmet, to help them feel that they can cope with the outside world. Now, as we all know, for the last 2 years, the outside world has been a scary, unpredictable space. As adults, we've felt that. Children felt it too, and they've picked it up from us. They need to play more than ever at this time in history. What's interesting as well is that we know that when children play, particularly when they play something like a superhero, aka Batman, they learn better. This fascinating research by White et al. Showed us that when a child is talked at and taught, they learn this amount. When they do something with objects to learn, they learn this amount. But when they do it as a superhero, they learn the most. And this is called the Batman effect, that when children embody it with a metaphor of a hero and feel they're the heroes of their learning, they learn much more, and particularly around perseverance and on task. Again, we need perseverance more than ever post-pandemic. We join great thinkers and leaders when we talk about play. The report from the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago talked about how we must equip our children with the tools to address and embrace the new realities of tomorrow. We didn't know I don't think they knew what those realities would be when they wrote this quote, but this is such a truism. To do this, we must allow them to develop through play. Fewer play moments means fewer opportunities to develop the skills children need to thrive in the dynamic, challenging economies of tomorrow. And here to the World Economic Forum, we're totally with you here. There's also an organization called the Real Play Coalition, spearheaded by Lego, National Geographic, IKEA, and Unilever, I think, that's set up a community that we are very much part of, advocating to bring play back into children's lives. So a lot of resources globally about the power of play. So I was going to read you another story. This one is specific and was inspired by what I was seeing in Singapore during the pandemic. Try and explain to parents why children needed to play and how play impacted on them. And this is called Lin Lin in Lockdown. It's 2020, and Lin Lin is a 4-year-old girl on lockdown. She doesn't really know why, but she and her family have had to stay at home for weeks now. She hears her parents talking about illness and worrying a lot about grandma and grandpa. Daddy shouts more. Mummy sometimes cries, and they always seem worried. Something bad is out there. Maybe it's a monster. Maybe it's trying to get them. Lin Lin isn't sure. She doesn't really understand what germs are. She's never seen one. So Lin Lin is confused. The world has become a scarier space than normal. Smaller, confined, and uncertain. She likes being home with Mummy and Daddy more, as she gets lots of their attention, but fundamentally, she doesn't feel safe. She has no friends to play with, and she can't run outside to the playground. Her days have taken on a new form in their small city flat, less social, less physical, and strangely unsettling. Food becomes central. Sometimes she likes to play with it and make a mess with it, which irritates Mummy. Occasionally, she has online lessons with her classmates, but she quickly loses interest if they're not interactive. Talking heads on screens are not engaging, and she would prefer a video game with music and clear visuals that she can control. Her sanctuary is her bedroom, her dollhouse, and her teddy bears. She constantly rearranges her toys, ordering and sequencing them, and rescuing her teddies from disasters. She builds dens of pillows and her duvet, which she and her teddies hide in. And sometimes she has tantrums when her mother tries to clear them up before she has finished. Her mother worries that Lin is anxious and tries to reassure her that COVID does not make children ill. But Lin knows it scares her parents, so it must be something to worry about. She uses play not just to express her anxiety, but also to process it and make sense of the world around her. Playing with her food makes her feel free. Lining up her teddies gives her a sense of control. Reorganizing her doll's house helps her feel she can influence something. And building safe spaces helps her build resilience. Lin uses play to make sense of the world, her world, in the language that works for her. So I hope that sort of illustrates how children, given the opportunity, will use play to make their world feel safe, give them what we call an inner locus of control. It often doesn't make sense to us because it's a language many of us have forgotten. But children have taught me very clearly that play matters for them. And I've watched play transform children from all different walks of life, and children who have school refusal, who've had depression, who are suffering from some sort of trauma or have a developmental delay or a physical disability. I've been very privileged over the last 30 years, and particularly in the last 20 when I've been working with children, to see the transformative power of play. And I hope that story illustrates it for you as well. So now what we're going to do is just introduce you to the model that we came up with in rural India as a response to how children learn. And it was also informed by my work in Singapore and my training as an art therapist, and work particularly with children with special needs, where a lot of play literature and a lot of play practice looks at what we call higher play, which is when you're able to do pretend play, when you're able to be symbolic, when you have language. But for any of you who work with younger children or with children particularly who learn differently, you'll know that they don't often follow that trajectory, and sometimes they may not have language. They're not able to do pretend play. And when Carrie and I were working in rural India, we found that we were working with children with quite profound challenges. And a lot of them were nonverbal. They had a lot of physical challenges. They had what we call sensory challenges that I'm going to introduce you to in a minute. And we needed a model that showed how children develop from play, from the moment they're born, almost pre-birth, if you look at some of the play therapy literature from Professor Sue Jennings, up to that higher play. So we came up with the developmental play model that we've been training in the Philippines, in Singapore, in India, and now in the UK, to help people understand play and how it is built on stages, not ages, and it begins from the conception when the child becomes conscious in utero. But I'm going to show you our little animation that I hope will show, not just tell, how the developmental play model works. Play is the language of childhood,
It's what children do naturally. They know instinctively that it's what they need to do to learn and develop. But adults often forget how we played and learned. Developmental play reminds us what it means to play, how it transforms the way children understand the world, and teaches them the fundamental skills for life. To help adults help children make that journey, the same developmental play pyramid takes children through 4 play stages. Each stage builds on the one before it, creating strong foundations for life. Stage 1 is sensory body play, where a child learns all about their body and how it interacts with the world through its 8 senses. Without this in place, the world can be a strange and confusing place. Stage 1 is also about attachment safety play, where the child needs to feel cared for by adults. They need this solid foundation of love to grow into Stage 2, creative, explorative play. They become little explorers, creating, playing, moving, and learning. They start to get a sense that they can make some impact on the world around them. That usually means making a mess. But don't worry, that's good. Stage 3 is meaning-making play, where they pattern, sequence, and begin to form ideas about how the world works and where they fit into it. So they may stack bricks in a certain way, or line up their soft toys and knock them all down again just to see what happens. These 3 stages happen before a child can really talk, and they are the foundation of Stage 4, where a child develops the skills of higher play. They have language and imagination, they can follow rules, make friends, and do make-believe play. They have a strong sense of who they are, and they're ready for school and more critical thinking and learning. Times when children find life a struggle, they need to go back to one of these stages to build their foundations a little bit stronger. That's where the developmental play approach can support them, especially for children with challenges. It's an inclusive model for all children. It's never too late to build strong foundations so that children can have the best start in life for the best chance in life.
So as I said, it's very much about thinking of play in stages, not ages, and what we call the power of the pre-verbal. And again, if you think back to Lin, she wasn't thinking or analyzing what was happening to her. She was just instinctively doing creative, explorative play and meaning-making play to cope with the challenge of living in the world as she saw it at the time and the fears that she had. So the idea that so much is happening with children that isn't about language and isn't always in a symbolic, metaphorical way that we can understand, but it's still happening. So our model really helps, we hope, you see how children need to play to make it their superpower that they need to cope. And the foundation of it being sensory body and attachment safety. In a lot of my work, I go back again and again for children of all ages, and sometimes with adults as well, back to that foundation, because with a solid foundation, we can cope with things far better. We work with the body, we engage the body, and we need to feel safe in relationships and in the world that we find ourselves in. I haven't got time to go through this in full depth, but when we look at building the stages up and giving children opportunities for different types of play, it's helpful to understand what each level represents and what components are within it. So we've done a lot of research in developing this, and next year there'll be a book coming out which will go through this in far more depth. If you're part of our community, we'll let you know when it's published. But it's in understanding what is the component of each level, you're able to see what your children need, what level your children are playing at, and hopefully then understand more the language of their play and support it so that they become the superheroes they need to be. And what's interesting, just a tiny little bit of neuroscience about what happens when we have trauma or when we are anxious. The blood flows far more into the amygdala, into the reptilian brain. This is your hindbrain. It's called the reptilian brain because it's what we share with the reptiles. It's our fight, flight, and freeze part of the brain. And I'm sure we can all relate to when you have a shock or you have stress, you tend to either shut down or you fight or you run away. And what's been happening over the last 2 years, that a lot of us have been in a constant state of high arousal in our reptilian brain because we have felt uncertain of the world around us. Now, the neocortex is our frontal lobe. This is where you have higher play, where you have language. This is what makes us human. And the limbic system is more our emotional, social part of the brain. Now, what we do when we're playing using the developmental play pyramid is that we are building the preverbal system, the limbic system. And so we're helping bridge back into the neocortex. So the idea is that through play, we can build back better social and emotional skills. This is the way we practice as developmental play practitioners, calming that reptilian brain, bringing in elements of safety, and calming the body through sensory body play, and then the creative explorative play and the meaning making play bridges through the limbic system up into higher levels of play. This is how we neurobiologically build back better. I wanted to say a little bit about sensory processing. This is an occupational therapy framework. Both Carrie and I are occupational therapists and have trained a lot in this area. And the more I learn about the multisensory way we experience the world, the more I realize what incredible ways play can feed what we call sensory integration and help children build a more cohesive, safe, and positive understanding of the world around them. Now, usually people say, we've only got 5 senses, or maybe 6. We've got hearing, smell, touch, vision, and taste. We also have what we call the 3 hidden senses. And I'm going to show you a little video in a moment, an animation, which I think will illustrate it and is a bit more fun than only listening to me all the time. So here comes our animation on what sensory processing is. Oh, there's a bit of references first. So here is our little video on understanding the sensory systems.
Children experience the world through their bodies. It's the foundation of all their feeling and the basis of all their learning. When they're rocked, they feel calm. When they see their parents smile and hear them coo, they feel loved. And when they crawl, run, jump and dance, they feel a wonderful sense of control. They experience their world through 8 senses, not just the sight and smell, hearing, taste and touch. We all have 3 hidden senses. First is the vestibular sense, our balance, and how we feel grounded in whatever we do. Second is proprioception, the sense of effort, movement, and gravity that tells us what our body is doing, where it is in space. And the third is interoception, the messages from our internal organs, which tell us when we feel hungry, or nervous, or angry, or just need to go to the bathroom. All our 8 senses need to work together to help children navigate their world. This is known as sensory integration. But if there are challenges in any of these senses, they may not integrate. A child will struggle, and the world can be a scary and confusing place. That's why building the body and the brain through sensory body play is a foundation of the developmental play pyramid. It's a way to integrate all 8 senses to give your child the best start in life for the best chance in life.
So I just wanted to say a little bit about the sensory systems, because I think this is something that we will longitudinally see have been quite impacted during the pandemic, particularly children who haven't been able to go outside and play. I'm going to pop the slide, pop it back when you've got that vision, because I quite like this little picture. If you think about particularly those of you who've had long lockdowns, that children have been inside. I know in the Philippines, talking to some of my colleagues over there, that a lot of children have started being far more on screens. Now, we're on a screen now. It's a wonderful thing in some ways, but also I'm sure some of you have experienced Zoom fatigue. You're sitting, you're very overstimulated visually, and you're having to focus auditorily. A lot of the other senses are not really working, apart from your core for being able to sit on a chair, but it's not moving in lots of different domains. Now, our bodies were made to move. Children need to learn through movement. And there are some correlations of the rise in anxiety with the overstimulation of the visual and the auditory system for a lot of schools, and not getting out and moving in nature enough. Coming from Singapore, one of the fascinating things from a sensory point of view I've seen is that children never walk on uneven surfaces. Even in our park, boardwalks made of wood. And so children are not having to micro adjust their core. Now, your vestibular system is very important, because the core is about being grounded physically through your body. And it gives you balance. Now, balance isn't just literal. That mind-body link shows us that balance is also emotional. So when you're able through your body to feel and micro adjust to different changes in the kind of surface you're walking on, your core is working harder and you learn to be flexible and adaptable. So it's highly connected. I'm back in England at the moment, and I went for a walk in the woods, having been in Singapore for a long time. And I was exhausted when I came back because the surface is all uneven. I'm having to navigate rocks. It was throwing me all over the place. And I thought, oh, I needed this. But I also felt I'd overcome something, that I'd fought over the pebbles and the stones and the roots, and my body had worked hard and my emotions felt good. And children who haven't been able to go out even into playgrounds and swing and climb and rock and adjust their hind stem, it's linked to the reptilian brain, they haven't made that versatile and strengthened it. So sensory integration is a really important lens for understanding how children learn, and how for healthy, happy children who are flexible and resilient, we need to give them multi-sensory experiences. So that's why I wanted to just focus a little bit on that. Any of you designing programs post-COVID, post-pandemic, for the new normal, whatever we want to call it, I would really urge you to make sure that you get lots of movement, lots of multi-sensory experiences. Think about what your children have missed in the last few years and try and supplement activities that fill in the gaps. Our brains develop better when they are integrated with all the senses. A lot of the learning we know about this as well is from working with children on the autistic spectrum, and they've taught me a lot about how sensory systems matter, and how when one is either under responsive or oversensitive, it makes the world a more scary space. So what can we do as adults? I think the more we can understand play, the more we support our children, listen to that language. And I hope that my short introduction on the developmental play model helped you begin to think about, what are children telling me through their play? Because they're telling you things all the time. They're speaking to us. It's just in a language we're not always able to understand because we've grown up and we've forgotten it. I remember when I was expecting my first child, a dear friend said to me, Caroline, having children, your children will teach you how you learned. And I'm always grateful for my children for showing me the things I'd forgotten as an adult. And so for us as adults, we really want to affirm children in their play. If we can give them permission to play and allow them to play. If we can attune to their play and validate it, oh, I see you like playing this. That looks good. I see it makes you happy. They're going to be able to play in the way they need to play. I was chatting with a team I was training yesterday about how important it is to facilitate, not instruct. Children are the experts in play. If we allow them to be, we might facilitate by getting them the right materials or encouraging them or providing a safe space in the house or an outdoor playground, but we shouldn't direct their play. We need to make it meet their needs. I realize from my own clinical work and my own children that children know what they need to do. And I look and see and I watch and I know that they're doing the right thing when, what we say, the light in their eyes, when they experience joy. And if possible, if we can be playmates with them, join in their play, usually under their direction, they'll take you on an amazing journey. We do need to bring play back. And if we stop children playing, we limit a whole load of learning opportunities, emotionally, cognitively, and physically. I believe play matters. I know it transforms children's lives. And I believe it is our responsibility as adults to make sure that we give them as many opportunities as possible now so that they can become those superheroes they need to be to take this journey post-pandemic. So we think about how can we build a world where children can develop through play. Here at Create Cat, we're building a community. I know I've got quite a few of our certified play practitioners here today, which is fabulous. And a lot of you are advocating for that, and we will support as much as we can bring play back into children's lives because we believe very strongly that it is crucial for this. I just wanted to highlight as well some other resources we have on the Academy. We have, Carrie and I in March 2020 met together under some a suggestion of a friend of mine from UNICEF when everyone was going into lockdown in China. And they said, we need some play games. What can you give us? So Carrie and I developed 30 stay-at-home, play-at-home games, which are now in 14 different languages. You can find them for free on the Academy. They're an open source, and this is just an example of one of them. They give you an idea of a game. They tell you what you need to do it. They highlight what your child will learn, and they give you some hot tips around it. So please feel free to access those. So you could print those out for your parents as well. That might be helpful. And the book will be a bit like this as well. We have various published papers. Please keep in touch. If what we've said today has excited you, you can follow us on our website. We've got a Facebook page, we've got a Twitter, we've got about 82 podcasts from across the world about play and creativity. And these are our hashtags if you want to share ideas or thoughts of today. Or because here at Create Cat, we really want the message of play to get out there so that we don't have a lost generation of children. So I hope you've been inspired by playfulness. Thank you.